symmetrical universe that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings obliteration.
Peace, peace, peace.
I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing.
Okay.
Only I remain. I must not fear. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration.
Peace, peace, peace. All right. So, we are back again on another strong. And as we did last strong, we're talking about Dune. This is Movie Understandings, and I am Brother Low. And from part one, we sort of got into, the Bene Gesserit and the Kwisatz Haderach. And we got into a little bit on what led up to the peace of Kashia. But we got into a little bit of what happened before the events of Dune, just to set up what the present of Dune looks like now, at least from the book standpoint, and not the actual movie or made for TV movie like this one is. So, in part two, we are dealing with, at least at the beginning, we're dealing with the Baron Harkonnen. And by being, on Arrakis and basically breathing in the spice, and he starts to have premonitions. And one that he has is of Paul staring back at him. This is important, which I will reveal later in the scene, because you'll finally get what's really staring back at him. But he sees that and terrorizes him. After that part, you see Fade. He's enjoying it, right? He's just smiling and just taking delight in basically the Baron's torture. But then he gives them some intel of saying that Paul and Jessica are dead, and Baron asks him, you've seen the bodies, right? It's like nobody could survive those storms, so they're surely dead, but we killed Duncan Idaho, and we captured Dr. Connors. But then you get the other scene of Paul and Jessica wandering in the desert, and they decide to peace, Sister Manera. They decide to find the Fremen, and basically they're going to find the Fremen in the deep desert, right? And now the next thing that happens that's very important is there's a Paul has a waking dream. My name is Precious. Paul has a waking dream, right? And the waking dream is very important in the books. And it sets up something that you'll see in the third part, but because we're basically going from a book standpoint, I'm going to explain this scene now. So he has awakened dream, right? And he tells his mother about this dream. In the movie, he says, you know, what did you do? I'm a freak, and you have to understand this. This is why it's important because Paul's 15 at this time. You can't really get these type of emotions from a grown man that's really needed. But in the book, he's 15 and he really awakens to a lot of things when he has this waking dream, right? And so he confronts his mother. He literally confronts his mother about this. And he says, you were supposed to have only daughters for the Atreides. Now, mind you, only him and Jessica and the Reverend Mother only knew that. That's just Bene Gesserit information. But now he knows it because the spice is changing them. Like in the movie, he says, the spice in everything, and now I'm having dreams even when I'm awake. It's really changing me. And in the books, it's really changing him as well. But now he knows certain information about basically what happened, things that happened before it was born, and that's what he confronts his mother on. You were supposed to have only daughters for the Atreides, and you ended up having a son. But it wasn't really for his father's benefit, like she so-called claimed. He says, no, you wanted to birth the Kwisatz Haderach. You wanted a male Bene Gesserit. And that's the tea that he spills, because the Kwisatz Haderach is basically what it says. It's a male Bene Gesserit. And like I said in part one, whereas the Bene Gesserit can only basically look at the past from a matrilineal bloodline, the Kwisatz Haderach can look beyond that. He can look beyond both bloodlines, but also he can look beyond the future as well. And so he confronts her about it. You were supposed to give daughters to in order for one of them to be married to the Harkonnens, and you didn't do it. But then he's like, well, let me drop a bomb on you, mom. And the bomb is, we are Harkonnens. Now in the book he drops that bomb, and then there's no chapters, but that's sort of where a break happens, and where a chapter will begin. That's where the chapter ends in a sense. But he tells her, we are Harkonnens. And then she's like, what are you talking about? And he says, you're a Harkonnen. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm not a Harkonnen. Yes, you are. You're the Baron's daughter. The Baron's daughter, well, if you know anything, the Baron is, but Paul can see that, yeah, that's his daughter. And when he was younger, he swung both ways at one point in time, and he delved in those pleasures, as Paul would say. And out of that, out of him doing that came you. So we're Harkonnens. And then you see that's what the Bene Gesserit has been hiding from you all this time, that you're the daughter of the Baron Harkonnen. And then you see how, basically, in this scene, how twisted and messed up the Bene Gesserit is. They already had a Harkonnen daughter married to an Atreides heir. you know, but but that's not enough for them apparently. But now from this scene, you see why in the beginning why the Baron is confronted in his basically in his own waking dream of Paul because that's his grandson, but he doesn't know that. But that's his own bloodline staring back at him, basically giving him a foreshadowing of what's to come, right? Of you know, Paul coming for him, and also you see that from this from that first scene, he knows who Muad'Dib will actually become or who he will be. And as Sister Katia just said, hit the like, share, subscribe. And so Paul drops this bomb on her, whereas he's already getting these prescient uh, dreams and things of that nature, and can tell um, his mother this. But moving right along, they keep on looking for the Fremen, and they get to a basically an abandoned siege or a hollowed out siege, and they find Stilgar, and and his basically a band of Fremen, right? And Stilgar explains, this is the guy, Liet, well, the boy that Liet told us to seek. But they're not going to do anything to Paul. But they tell Jessica right now your only value is the water in your body, and then somebody says it's the law still, and then he says the law, and then you see Jessica does the weirding way where her body moves very fast and fluid, and she catches Stilgar off guard, and got him in basically a chokehold, and uses the voice on him and says, tell them to stop hunting my son. Paul's going up the steps, and he knocks out one guy, and he's hiding. And then while she's basically with a standoff with everyone else, still is like, well, as leader of this tribe, because he's a chief. So as leader of this tribe, I offer sanctuary to the weirding woman and her son. No Fremen anywhere would dare lay a hand on you without while you're under my protection. So basically, in that scene, he covers Jessica, and he covers Paul. She's like, for how long? And he's like, don't be foolish. You're already fugitive to the Harkonnens. Don't become a fugitive from us. So she lets him go, and he takes in the show. He's like, merciful God. You know what I'm saying? I've heard stories about the weird and way. Now imagine a man, with that type of power, And then she says, yeah, must teach each other. And then she calls for Paul, and then here Paul meets the woman in his dreams, which is Cheney. And they go down there, and they actually start to move with with the Fremen, from different sieges, because they're on their way home pretty much. And basically, still places Cheney in charge of Paul, and he's to basically shadow her movements, as they, basically ruck or walk, basically across the desert, the deep desert, so they can get home. And they get to Cave of Ridges, right? Where they plan on resting. And one thing that you know, Paul keeps on staring at Cheney, you know what I'm saying, and Jessica notices this, and um, she says, these are simple people, and and for our survival, it'll be best to basically accommodate their legends. So basically, you see that these people have a culture. You see it as primitive in a sense. And in order to survive or to save your skin, you're going to manipulate their cultural beliefs to save you and your son. Now, from the viewer standpoint, now we know that the legends are true, but just think of the egotistical aspect of it, where what if it wasn't? You're basically using them. You know what I'm saying? You're using the Fremen just to save your life or whatever. Or using the Fremen to get your revenge. So that's something to seek. That's something to take note of. Also, once again, you see Jessica's ego come into play in a sense, because already, from the waking dream scene, you already know that he's already confronted her about her ego once already. And so as they, basically uh walk across the desert. Meanwhile, back in Arakeen, um the Baron, got a hold of uh Kynes, and they basically throw him in the desert uh without a steel suit. So that's one thing that happens. And they learn of a pre-spice mass blow, right? Which basically is the spice coming up to the surface. That's how they are able to harvest it, because they the carryalls that we know in part one. That's what they look for. They look for spice blows, and that's how they harvest the spice. Well, the Fremen do the same thing, but they do it to offer bribes to the Spacing Guild, to have, Arrakis free of their satellites, as they say, so no one knows what they are doing here. You know. So mind you, it's like this. The guild, along with the Bene Gesserit and the Emperor, um, they basically are silent partners in the company that harvests the spice. It's called Chom, and actually that's an acronym. You know, I can't really quote the whole acronym. I just know that M is mercantile, right? But the Chom company that harvests the spice and everything, they're silent partners of that. So now you have the guild also getting kickbacks from the Fremen along with what they make, the percentages that they make of spice that they get from the Chom company, right? But that makes sense for the guild, because they consume mass quantities of spice, for their navigators, which I wish they got more into when it comes to the factions, because, like I said, the guild is all about pure mathematics, and that would have been very interesting to see, you know, the 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 cultural aspect of the Spacing Guild, because to me, the Spacing Guild is like maybe the evolved form of Supreme Mathematics in 120, but thousands of years down the line. You know what I'm saying? So that would have been interesting to really see and understand. And so after that, like I say, they reach Cave of Ridges and whatnot, and Jameis is sore about, Paul's sucker punching him and things of that nature, and he challenges him. He challenges him to a fight to the death, right? And you see that as the challenge is about to happen, still brings out a Chris knife, right? And what you have to know about the Chris knife is that it's made from the teeth of a great worm. You know, and so they say Chris knife is our ceremonial weapon. They actually carry a, 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 a bladed tooth of the great worm with them. All Fremen do. And so he gives it to Paul, and then they fight. And then Paul's like, "Do you yield?" And he's like, and James is like, "Yield?" And then still says, "There's no yielding. It's to the death, boy." And then his mom's like, "He's never had to kill before." And then still's like, "What? Then you better learn." That's the cool part. Still don't care. You better learn. you know. And at basically the fight, he Paul really tries to make him submit and yield, but James ain't doing that. And so in the end, James ends up dead and whatnot. And after that, basically still talks to Jessica, and he explains to her that, this is our way. And he says, no man recognizes leadership without the challenges of combat. He's basically, telling them about their culture, you know what I'm saying? And then he explains to them about a legend, about, there will be a boy from the outworld, the only son of a Ben and Joshua will come and basically free us, who will be the Mahdi, the Messiah and whatnot. And his mother would be called, Sayadina, which means friend of God, right? And he says, there's been news of, your son and the teachers. And he's like, and she says, you think that me and my son are 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 that? And he says, yeah, I hope and I fear, because if he is, then he has to call me out and challenge me, for leadership of my own tribe, you know. But after that, they have James's funeral, and you see them basically dehydrate the body, in a coffin, um, and whatnot. Mind you, that in the new one, I'm sort of screaming showing it, because in the new one, James is melanin rich. So already, what that's a symbol of. Um, so after the funeral, Paul is given the water that James has carried, and he's basically told the symbolism of the water, and he's like, may you go for the good of the tribe and share it, with others in need, and then he's given a name, and he chooses the name Muad'Dib after a little mouse, you know, and then uh Stilgar tells him what the name means, you know, smart and and wise in the ways of the desert. And he says we call him the teacher of boys. In the books he gets that name, and he also gets a name that only Fremen will call him, which is Usul. That and the meaning is Usul is something like the base of the pillar. Um, so he gets two names, right? And so after that, they give him a name, and he's named. Basically, he's in the tribe now, and so you see them reach Seats to Bar, and they do it by riding the worm. One sort of important thing, as they ride the worm, you hear the actual rider call out as he's riding the worm, and you sort of can't hear what he's saying, but if you sort of read the books, it's hi yo, right? And in the book, it has a meaning, of certain things, but you would have to read the glossary of the book to know what that means, along with other things. I can't really remember all of that, what that really means in a sense. But usually they say it when basically you ride your first worm and things of that nature. And after that, they learn that Liet is dead. He is actually dead in that he reaches the pre-spice mash blow, um, that they've been tracking, and then they find his body there, and they realize, yeah, the Harkonnens did that to him. So Paul goes to find Cheney, and she shows him, like the plants they have in the siege, and then she shows him the water cache that they have, and she says, there we have thousands of these water caches. Shalom, Sister Quia. And she says only a few of us know them all. What she's saying is only a few of them know all their names, because each cache has a name. And then she says that this is what we will use to change, the face of Arrakis, which is, from being a desert to someplace green, which was the dream of her father, Dr. Kynes. Now, in that scene, I would say that you see the naivete or the naiveness of the Fremen when it comes to changing the face of Arrakis, and as it being its salvation. But also, very important note about the Fremen is that they are not indigenous to Arrakis. And here's where I answer Brother Zach's question when he asks, were the Fremen Muslim? And I said yes and no, because the actual name or the ancestral name of the Fremen was the Zensuni. So it's, it's a mixture between Zen Buddhism and basically Islam. That's where Frank Herbert got that from. He used both religions in that aspect to create the Fremen, and their background. So they're called the Zen Sunni. And then later, when they, I can't remember what their actual home world was, but they leave it and then they go to Arrakis, and then they can't leave anymore because of the spice, basically. But yeah. And after that, we see after that scene, we see Paul learns, basically Fremen warfare, as they make, guerrilla raids on, the Harkonnens and spice transports and things of that nature, right? and he learns. Basically, that's part of his manhood training, I would say, or manhood martial training. In the martial sciences of warfare, of Fremen culture. Because he already knows how to fight from his own back. Now he's learning the ways of basically the martial science of the or martial warfare of the Fremen in this point. you know. And then Paul has another waking dream about, basically the future. And Stilgar asks him, where do you go, when you go away like that, and Paul basically asks, you ever wonder about the future, Stilgar? And he says, the future, Muad'Dib, just is. And then he, goes back to sleep, because he doesn't worry about the future like that. Whereas Paul does, because he can see it, Um, and then next you have the guild secretly meeting with the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Moyem on planet Kaitang, which is the planet of the Emperor. And they talk on about the navigators, saying, there's a problem on planet Arrakis. There's a nexus that they can't see. And Helen is like, a misstep can be catastrophic, because if the navigators can't see the future of that point, of that point, then anything they do can be catastrophic and mess things up. You got to understand that these people could see the future, so they would try to, take paths any way that they could, so they could basically control what happened. You know what I'm saying? Um, but now they'll reach the point where there's something that they can't see, that's going to happen. And he says, we sense a higher power, in this, you know. And so, after that meeting, he says the spice must flow, and then she says, the balance of the houses must be maintained, Um, but as they leave, you see Irulan hears, pretty much was outside the whole time, hearing everything. I will say this, at least right now, I think, Irulan was underrated in both movies, and sorta in the book. But Irulan was real cool. Her storyline was real cool, to see where it goes. But you see Chini talks to Jessica, and she she talks about, she looks at her skin and says how, her skin is like cream, because of the moisture. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's like it's it's like when the, basically when indigenous peoples or indigenous melanin rich people saw, white people for the first time. It's like your skin's like cream. You got water in it, so much water in it. This says Muad'Dib's skin is like that, and she's already basically telling herself that, she likes Paul, and that's her back. We'll just say it like that. And meanwhile, on Katane, you got Irulan, trying to figure out what happened, to basically to Paul and the Atreides, when this basically this coup happened, and so she says, I'm gonna go to Gidi Prime because Faye's having a birthday party or whatever. And at first, you got the emperor, he's against it, but the prime minister Hassan Mefrenring says, let her go and just let it be chaperone. And he goes, you know. Before Irulan goes, though, she sends basically one of her maid servants, and basically that main servant is, basically a seducer for Fade. You know, mind you, the chick ain't cute, but you know, nevertheless, one thing you get from this, at least, um, seduction is actually subtle. Especially when it comes to the Ben and Gesserit, they use subtle ways of seduction. If you do not know, they use very subtle ways for seduction, and they're very good at it. That's like Zach, like brother Zach would say, they got busy. You know what I'm saying? Another thing, if you did not know, the Ben Gesserit actually had a standing army. They literally had a standing army. So, but you don't know that until like the the last two books, pretty much, that they had a standing army. You know, but that's one thing about them. Also, after that, Paul meets with the naives of the Sieges, or the tribes of the Fremen, and he asked them, send me your young men so we can teach everyone, this weird way, and we will create what will be known as the Firakim. You know, um, and they agree, and so also, Reverend Mother Ramallo, she comes to Siege Tabar and she meets with Jessica. And then she says, you've done very well to exploit, our legends, because Reverend Mother Ramallo is Bene Gesserit, but but she's adopted the culture of the Fremen, so she's very much Fremen, in a sense. And she's like, you've adopted to our legends well. And she's like, well, we had to do what we had to do to survive. You know what I'm saying? And she's like, and you may, but know this, which is what she says is pretty much foreshadowing. The very legend that protects you can also destroy you. And that's very foreshadowing and telling. But later down the line, if you read the books, you see how the legend sort of destroys the Atreides in a sense. You know. Also, if I didn't cover it, during the waking dream, now that I think about it, Paul knows that he has a sister, and that Jessica's pregnant, and she's been pregnant since before his father died. In the books, he calls her out by name. You're carrying my sister, and she will be known as Saint Alia the Knife. Which that will be her name, Alia, and they will call her Saint Alia the Knife. But after that, after she meets with Reverend Mother Ramallo, she meets Paul, and then he asks her, why didn't you marry my father, pretty much. And she explains, that as long as he wasn't legally married, or the any great house had a chance to wed, as the legal, as the wife, in a sense. And basically that meant an alliance or anything like that. And it was politics, and like she said, we both knew how important that meant. Shalom, brother Antonio. And basically, what that would mean is, if you understand sort of harem uh systems in a sense, for me, basically, if there was a legitimate wife read to the Atreides, any offspring born on that would be actually the main branch or the legitimate heir to House Atreides. It wouldn't be Paul, because he's just the son of a concubine. You see that. you know, you understand that if you watch East, Asian um period, historical dramas, when they get into harem politics, and always the son or daughter of of a concubine is far less than the actual wife um progeny, but that's what that could have happened if he didn't, if Leto decided to wed somebody else, with of the noble houses, or as they say, the noble houses of a Landsrod, because that's the actual um, term that they use for those nobles houses, because it's like a senate of noble houses, because it's more than one. Nirvana Fire made this point so clear. Exactly, brother Antonio. Exactly, brother Antonio. That's why I suggested it. Very good. you you get it. you know. So yeah. So he sort of understand. He understands, in that sense. But he asked Cheney pretty much the same thing. Is it possible to love someone so much that you're willing to give them up? And she says, I think, if you love someone, it's possible to share, the one you love with things greater than both of you. Which, if you read the books, which I have to keep on saying, you read the book, you know, this makes Cheney look like a bald-faced lie. Makes Cheney look like a bald-faced lie. you know. And I'll just say this, in the first book, you may love Cheney in the first book, right? But just like Paul, you may love Paul in the first, but the second book, you're not gonna like them very much. But that is set up that way, And in the second book, I didn't like Janie. I thought she dead, and she got on my nerve, So, but yeah, but she says that, right? And then she explains the secret of the spice, basically to Paul, that the worm, the great worm, Shai Halud, as they say, is the spice, and how the pre-spice mass blow actually is formed. It's formed basically from the nest of a great worm, and then she explains that as well, and then she doesn't go into the water of life, but she sort of explains it in a sense. And then, after, her and Paul, basically have a conjugal visit in the desert, so already, they're married in a sense. He has a waking dream and is visited by Reverend Mother Ramallah, and she said to him, where religion and politics, ride in the same cart, the whirlwind follows, and she says, you are the Kwisatz Haderach, you're the one that can be many places as one, you are the whirlwind, basically affirming what he is, he's a male Bene Gesserit in a sense. Now, mind you, that the Bene Gesserit wanted to create a male Bene Gesserit. That was the whole breeding program was for, but they wanted to control the Kwisatz Haderach, or the male Bene Gesserit, for their own means, you know. But like I say, you see how diabolical it is. These these female geneticists did all of this, and they just horrible. It's just horrible in a sense. And so, after that, you see, uh, Paul and his mother training, the Fremen men, and in the weird way. And here you have um, a character which you don't see as much in in this movie, but he plays a role. He plays a very big role, which is Otheum, who is a Fremen, but he's from Siege Kulan, and they come to basically learn the Wooden Way and become Fedaykin, and he's going to become a very important Fedaykin, or Fedaykin, and he's a good fighter. Otheum got it in. you know. Okay, would you say that the masculine force represents politics and the feminine force represents religion? Um, of the Bene Gesserit, I would say, hmm, masculine was politics and the feminine was religion. No, no, I wouldn't say that. If anything, brother Antonio, I would say that you got them switched in a sense, because politics is supposed to bring people together, which that's what they do. Because of their political, breeding program, the Bene Gesserit brings people, or bring noble houses and things of that nature together, which is politics. So they're very political, which it, it is what it is. In that sense, they bring these houses together, these people together, but the religion is male in a sense because it like I said, it religare, it binds people, it binds people, it brings back, what I'm saying. So it's binding. But I would say that for the Bene Gesserit, the politics is feminine, as well as the religion is feminine as well. And the only reason why I say that they're both feminine in the book sense is because the fact that the evolution of everything, or the evolution of events and things of that nature, comes from the man. It literally, look, you'll see it comes from the man in this point. You know what I'm saying? Everything that evolves or is basically revolutionized and set loose and free comes from the man. Whereas in this aspect, everything is binding. You know what I'm saying? And it's usually the women that's trying, like Ben Bishop, they trying to control and bind everything up, to their own control. Where you have the men, which in the form of the Atreides, they evolutionize themselves and set everything off balance and off kilter, so everybody can have free will. Now that's what Leto does. you know, and that's sort of what Paul is supposed to do. you know. He evolutionized himself to be the Kwisatz Haderach to basically supposedly free the Fremen from, this not only just the Harkonnen, but just their way of life, you know, their way of life and cultural way of life of being desert people. You know, that was supposed to be that's why he was supposed to be their Messiah. But like I say, this book was a cautionary tale on leaders. But if you look at this is a cautionary tale on false messiahs. If you think about it, it's also a cautionary tale on false messiahs. Because if you think about the messianic energy and at least in the biblical lore of what the messianic energy is, and you look at Paul Atreides, you be like, false messiah. He's not basically bringing up light bodies and things of that nature. No, he's not doing that. He's not doing that. He's setting things in motion. You know what I'm saying? That shouldn't be set in motion. That's not meant to be set in motion. And because this is part 2, I'll get into the things that he set in motion with him and Kynes. That's why I said that legend, and the naiveness of the Fremen plays a role. But I get into that in part 3 because it's early, and you'll sort of get an understanding basically when I sort of do a prologue, after that, just so you know why. But he sets things in motion, and he's basically no longer a prophet. By the second book, you like, man, he's literally a tyrant. And it's sort of the same way with Leto. He's seen as a tyrant, but the difference is Leto don't care. Leto is still trying to give human beings a free slate, even if they call him a tyrant. Because Ben Dresses always, they don't even refer to him by his name anymore. They just call him the tyrant, and talk about, the things that he did. But the things that he did was basically for the survival of mankind, because they would get to a point in time which only he could see where there will be no more. And he had to basically take over the Bene Gesserit breeding program just so they could have free will, especially the Fremen. Especially the Fremen. He took control of it, which they hated him for. But yeah. So after that, you see the Harkonnen are, taking more risks, and they're going deeper into the desert. And basically, Stilgar's tribe's like, well, we're going to go way south into the deep desert, where they can't find us. We're going to leave Siege Tabar. Well, Reverend Mother Romalu, she's old, so she can't make the journey. So they decide, that Jessica would take on the trial and become the new Reverend Mother for the Fremen. And, they show how they make the water of life. And what they do is they take a baby sandworm, or they stun his growth, a baby sandworm, and they flood, basically his sand pit or his sand pen with water. And as he takes in the water, he throws it back up. Basically, the bile or the the water that he throws up is literally the water of life. You sort of see it better in the 1984 version and understand it more. But he throws it up and dies. He throws up and then he dies because he can't live in water. It's very interesting. They can live in water when they're under the sands, because that's what basically the nest consists of is water. But once they trade that life for basically earth or the sands, they can't no longer live in water like that anymore. And so that's what you see. And so she takes the water of life, you know what I'm saying, while pregnant. Again, that goes into Jessica's ego. That is going to be confronted, but not by her son, but by her grandson, because he's going to talk about her taking the water of life with while being pregnant. So she's pregnant, she's taking the water of life, and she talks to a younger Reverend Mother Ramallo, and she says she sees a place, and the Reverend Mother says, don't go there. That's the place we can't look. Only the Kwisatz Haderach can go there. So turn around or it will drive you mad. Which she's right. And then she says, don't be afraid. I offer you my life and the life of many Reverend Mothers before me. And so basically she has the memories of all these Reverend Mothers from the past, And she takes that within herself. That's basically the ritual, But they find out, that she's pregnant and she didn't say anything. And then, she says, well, this changes you both. You know what I'm saying? Take your daughter into your arms, and she must see everything that we see. So then she's told to change the waters, and she does that, But in that scene, you have to understand that that is reminds me of the ritual from Underworld when one elder awakens another. Hmm. Mm, I guess the blood being the memory. Yes, man. But yeah, I get what you're saying. But in that scene, because of Jessica's ego, she does a disservice to Alia. Alia, only the elder doesn't die. Just go to sleep. Right. She does a disservice to Alia because of her ego. She should have said something, because Alia was born or awakened, as she says, and she awakened to consciousness in her mother's womb. She really, literally was born a Reverend Mother. But because of that, that makes her into an abomination, what they call an abomination. She's literally born a Reverend Mother, but they call that, those born that way to be abominations. You know, you don't really understand this until you read like books 2 and 3. But that's how the Bene Gesserit is going to treat Alia all of life. She's the abomination. But she had, like she says, she has memories of so many Reverend Mothers in her head, and that's a problem for such a young mind, especially one that is just not even born yet. To have it literally, I would say, makes you crazy, because Ali is cuckoo, but it's because of her own fault. But she goes through that, and like in book 2, like like when you read it, the first scene is actually an interrogation with basically a priest, a Fremen priest, and a historian, right? Just like love. And and the reason why they arrested him and they're holding him and interrogating him is because he's given a actual historical account on a life of Muad'Dib and his family, and he goes into that, you know what I'm saying, on, you know, the things that happen with Muad'Dib and, well, Paul Atreides, and things of that nature. But he also talks about Alia, you know what I'm saying? And he says, have you ever even considered, because they consider, you know, the royal family or the Atreides to be holy as well. And then he says, have you considered, you know, Alia, you know, being born, you know, with all that memories as a Bene Gesserit and everything, you know, waking into consciousness like that. And he literally says, no rape can be, you know, can basically equate to what's happening to her. Because that's what's literally sort of happening to her in the womb. You know what I'm saying? He really, you know, says that, you know what I'm saying? Because one thing I can tell you about this historian is that he's from Ix. Okay, here's where numerology sort of plays in. He says, you know, my home planet is Ix. We get our name, Ix, because we are the ninth planet from our sun. So basically, what they did was they took the Roman numerals, um, you know, 10, well, I, X, which is 9, you know, and that's where you get X, you know. So you see the numerology playing that part right there, if you know what 9 is. Um, and so, but he talks about that, you know, and in the end they kill him, but they call, you know, what happened to Alia being preborn, you know, being preborn, and those that are preborns are seen as abominations because they're very sensitive to not only prescience and seeing the future and things of that nature and having all these memories, but they're also sensitive to these spirits, the spirits of the dead. You know, they not only have these memories, but they also can see, you know, the spirits of the dead. And if they're not careful, they'll end up being possessed. And that's why they're called the abominations. Because they can be easily, if they're not strong enough, they can be easily basically possessed by one of these spirits. And basically that's what happens to Alia. You know, and that's one of the reasons why Leto, which is Jesse's grandson, basically confronts Jessica, because he literally says, you did that to your own daughter. You left her there, you know, you left her on Arrakis, you know, with all that power, and she literally had, you know, no confidence. She really just wanted a mother and whatnot, but you left. I'm gonna say it. You left with Gurney back to Caladan, because that's what he said. You left with Gurney back, you know, y'all went back to Caladan and licked your wounds, and you left that little girl down here with all that power and whatnot. And that's why she is the way she is. And that's why you're going to lose her, you know? So, yeah. But that's in book 3. But that's why the series is so good, you know? And so that's what happens, you know, in that scene. You're seeing the basically Alia becoming preborn, in that scene. But also, that scene sort of reminds me of when they go into the black hole in Interstellar. That sort of is what is sort of what's happening with the memory, because you're in a time nexus, I would say, you know. And Paul, we'll get into that in part 3, you know, when we get into what Paul, you know, literally solidify and becoming the Quetzalcoatl. But after that, after she changed the waters and whatnot, you know, while that's happening though, you know, airlines on Giddy Prime, and she's basically seducing Fade, and Fade snitching off. You know, he's snitching off to Erlan on what happened on Arrakis, you know. And then, you know, she finds out that her father was involved and the Sardaukar was there, but they never find the bodies of, you know, Jessica and Paul, which very much intrigues her. But mind you, like I say, seduction is subtle. You know, she doesn't get with Fade in that moment. She gets her maidservant to do it. Like I say, that no, that's a lesson right there. Seduction is not loud. Seduction is not boisterous. Seduction is not attention whoring. Um, you know, it's not being a savage, classy, moody. That's, you know, it's none of those things. So if you don't know nothing else, you sort of get why the best seductresses or seducers are very subtle. If 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 Amazon does not take it off, because I like in 2 months or so, I will put Diary of a Geisha on the list just so we can get into that. You know, get into you know, courtesans and things of that nature. But you know, I did put on the list just because I was worried about it being taken off, so nobody would watch. You know, nobody would have time to watch it. But you know, she finds out. Exactly, it's good. It's good. But after that, it took me a long time to understand the next scene. But in the next scene, what's happening is a spice orgy. Apparently, apparently these things always happens, you know, from time to time with the Fremen. They have spice orgies, and children are born during these spice orgies. But they actually have them. That's what the water life does. It's sort of like an aphrodisiac, and has everybody have orgy. It's like that part in the Matrix. That's what that represented. So it's the same thing here, you know. But once again, you know, Paul's with Cheney, and you know, he's talking. You know, she's telling him how you know, she sees things. You know what I'm saying? Things about the future, and he says, you know, I've known you for a very long, I've always known you, Cheney, and I've seen us grown old, and many children and things of that nature, you know, sort of promising her all the moon, stars, and that's not even what's going to happen, you know. And he knows it. Mind you, it's just one possible future that could happen. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. And he knows that, you know, he's going to come into that knowledge. So he knows even then, you know, that's just one possible future. That's not really what's going to happen for him, you know. But you also see, you know, basically how him meddling in futures like that, meddling in time, um, causes problems. You know, for me, it's like this. Well, it's not in the TV series, but it's like when like the Farscape TV movie came out, and everybody's trying to get John Crichton because he has wormhole technology. He knows the secrets of wormhole technology, and he was basically given that knowledge by the ancients, in that universe. And one race called the Scarens is trying to get this wormhole technology or wormhole knowledge, and they actually go to basically through a wormhole to meet an ancient, which he calls Einstein, and you know, uh, he wants him to tell, basically the leader of the Scarens, why, uh, I have wormhole knowledge, and he's like, yes, and I can fill one out, and um no one was coming. And he says, yes. And he says, but can I, basically utilize a wormhole for any type of weapon or anything like that? And he says, no. And he says, well, why is that? Because, and then the angel says, because no one should have that power. And he says, tell him, that's what I'm trying to tell him, that he takes some snow and says, this is, this is your brain. This is your brain on wormholes. You mess with the natural system of things, you cause problems with multiple timelines. That's why I don't have that power. But the leader of Scam is like, I must have that power, and he still won't get it. And then he's kicked out of, the agent actually kicks him out of the wormhole. But it's the same thing with Paul. He deals with all these timelines, and he's multiple. He's basically affecting so much just by him delving possible futures, even if they don't happen. There's an outcome in them happening. You know what I'm saying? He's messing up timelines. He's basically doing what the guild and what the Ben and Just were doing. In that sense. But yeah, you see Spice Origin, and then he has a waking dream of everybody in the Spice Orgy dying, and there's blood on his hands, and he's just crying and trying to hug, and he wakes from it. But that's a foreshadowing to come. Literally, blood, Freeman blood, is going to be on his hands, and it's going to be his fault. Blood is going to be on his hands. And that's the end. Well, at least the end of part 2, right? Like I say, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in with that, because there's so much. Like I say, so much you don't get. But that's why it's good to read the books, so you could connect the dots. Collect the dots to connect the dots. Because it's very interesting, what I'm saying, because you see certain responsibilities and things happen, and basically all of this stems from ego. That's why I say it's not only a cautionary tale on leaders or political leaders or things of that nature. It's also a cautionary tale on false messiahs. We ain't gonna even say false prophets. That's a cautionary tale too. Damn, what is a movie that's like that talks about false prophets that isn't biblical? Gotta put that in there. That isn't biblical. That doesn't matter, because there's some good biblical movies out, But yeah. But it's a cautionary tale, on false messiahs and charismatic leaders, in that sense. And you, like I say, you get to see. Like I say, I wish they did more with the Spacing Guild and whatnot. It's like with part 2. I wish they got, but not part 2, but the second movie, which is called Children of Dune. I wish they got more into the Tleilaxu. The Tleilaxu is actually a race of people that lives on Bene Tleilax, and they call it the Tleilaxu. And while the Bene Gesserit deals with genetics and being geneticists and things of that nature, and dealing with politics and things of that nature, The Tylexu deals with cloning. You know, they deal with cloning and things of that nature. And just seeing how they are and how they operate is very deep, especially how they clone things. Because if you know anything about the Tylexu, there's always been a mystery why you never see uh 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 an axolotl tank. It's a very guarded, kept secret amongst the Tylexu, right? But that is very interesting, if you read more and more and more, and their science and how they came with all this science and whatnot, you know. But this was yeah. Well, impressions. It's just not about watching. You have to read because I can, you can watch all of this, but if you never read the books, you really don't. I know some say, read the books is better. It's not just that it's better. There's more information that you get out in the books where you can, like I say, collect the dots to connect the dots. Like I say, you wouldn't even like if you just watch the movie, you wouldn't know that Jessica had an ego or that she was that egotistical. You know, you have to read the books in order to find that out. Or you wouldn't know how diabolical the Bene Gesserit was. Them really, basically dealing with incest like they do to create a Kwisatz Haderach. That, but that's the reason why they don't tell these girls that are in the Bene Gesserit their lineages, because if they knew, it'll shock them. They'll go crazy probably. But if you know anything about real world genetics, there was a royal family that sort of did that and it failed. just it. I'll give you. I'll give you one. Look at the Romanovs. Everybody had one ancestor, and we, one ancestor. All royal families could, European um, uh, royalty had that one Queen Victoria, as their ancestor. And you see, like at least for the Russians, they really didn't have a strong male heir. And that's one thing because they had that hemophilia, But that close blood tie, doesn't give you the results like it's supposed to. But in this book, it does. But hey, it is what it is. But how diabolical they are, you wouldn't know that if you didn't watch the movie. I mean, if you didn't read the books, or you wouldn't. What else? You wouldn't know that the Fremen were not indigenous to Arrakis. You think they were always there if you didn't read the books. you know. What else? Okay, since they ain't gonna talk about it in the movie, but they do talk. No, they don't even talk about it in part 2. Actually, here's something that you don't know unless you read the books. Stilgar and Cheney are actually family. They're literally family. They're family. They're kinsmen. You know. But that's more than one thing you find out. So I would say, read the book. Read the book because, like I say, if you like politics, read the first 2. You like philosophy, read the next 2. If you want to learn other workings and the inner workings of Bene Gesserits and not just them, Arnold Martres or Matra, Because I'm not going to be able to cover them and all of that, you know. But you read the last two, you know, and then you see what the difference, you know, with Bene Gesserit and Anna Martris coincides, you know, and things of that nature. So next strong, we will get into part 3, the final part. And it's going to be interesting, you know, and we're going to get into the conclusion. And, you know, after that, on something else, you know. So I want to give thanks for everybody coming out. Bevakasha, Sister Kashia, and enjoy the rest of the strong. See y'all Friday when we have another Shema. You know, so shout outs to, you know, the team over at Anu Life Global, you know, who puts that together, because they do a good job. They do a good job on that, you know. And I like how they break everything down, you know. So join us there as well. So not just don't like, share, and subscribe here. Like, share, and subscribe, you know, Anu Life Global, you know, and get some more of that light over there. So give thanks, everyone, and I will see you next strong for part 3. So give thanks, everybody, and shalom.